What happens when a billionaire, lost in a life of luxury and loneliness, meets a dusty-footed boy with nothing to offer but kindness? In the heart of rural Tennessee, a flat tire brings Richard Langston, a retired financial titan, face to face with Noah, a humble boy whose quiet act of generosity sets off a transformation far deeper than either could imagine. What begins as a simple roadside encounter blossoms into a journey of healing, rediscovery, and the kind of connection that money can't buy. This is not just a story about fixing a tire. It's about fixing what's broken in ourselves. Through compassion, trust, and the belief that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life forever. Richard Langston, a retired billionaire who once ran a chain of international banks, sat frustrated in his gleaming Maybach, stranded in the middle of the sun-scorched countryside of Tennessee. The sky was overcast, hinting at a coming storm, and the front tire was hopelessly flat. For a man used to commanding boardrooms and controlling stock markets, this was an unfamiliar kind of helplessness. He had tried calling roadside assistance 3 times, but the phone signal was non-existent. He checked again. 0 bars. With no one in sight and the landscape stretching for miles, Richard leaned back in his seat, sighing. When was the last time he had even seen a spare tire? Memories trickled back from his college days, long before chauffeurs and private jets. He had once known how to change a tire, but that was a lifetime ago. Just as frustration was giving way to resignation, he noticed a figure approaching in the distance. Small, steady, purposeful steps. A boy, maybe 12, 13 years old, walked toward him along the dusty roadside. Sunlight spilled behind the boy like a halo. Richard blinked. Who was this? The boy wore a faded t-shirt, torn jeans, and sneakers so worn out they barely clung to his feet. Dust coated his arms and face, but there was a calm purpose in his stride. Richard watched warily as the boy approached, stopping a few feet from the car and squinting at the flat tire. "Got a flat, sir?" the boy asked, his voice calm and direct. Richard lowered the window halfway. "Yeah, no signal out here. I'm stuck." The boy nodded. "I can fix it for you. Got a spare?" Richard blinked. I think so. Trunk should have it." Without hesitation, the boy popped open the trunk, found the spare, and retrieved the jack and lug wrench like he'd done it 100 times. Richard stepped out and watched in awe as the boy knelt down and began working. There was no wasted motion, no doubt in his hands. He moved with quiet precision. The billionaire, for once, had nothing to say. All he could do was watch this dusty, shoeless kid do something that felt almost miraculous. He was a stranger, but Richard felt strangely safe. In less than 10 minutes, the tire was replaced. The boy wiped his hands on his jeans, then stepped back and smiled. "All done. Should be good to go now." Richard reached into his wallet and pulled out a thick wad of cash, handing several crisp bills toward the boy. "This is for you. Thank you." But the boy took a step back. "No thank you, sir. I'm just happy to help." Richard's hand hung in the air, frozen. "At least take something," he insisted. The boy shook his head with a smile that felt like sunlight. "I don't help people for money. My mom says kindness is free, and we've got plenty of that." Without another word, the boy turned and started walking away. Richard stood still, hand full of money, heart strangely hollow. He had paid for everything in life: luxury, influence, even silence. But this was a transaction he couldn't complete. Back in his marble-floored estate, surrounded by priceless artwork and vintage wine, Richard couldn't stop thinking about the boy. The way he worked, the smile, the refusal. His private chef had prepared a 5-star meal, steak with truffle butter and grilled asparagus. But Richard didn't touch a bite. He sat in the study, glass of whiskey untouched beside him, replaying the moment in his mind. He had met presidents and prime ministers. He had dined with the world's most powerful. But a boy with dirt-streaked cheeks had disarmed him, with nothing but a lug wrench and decency. Why couldn't he shake the image? For the first time in decades, he felt something beyond boredom or routine. He felt incomplete. He knew what he had to do. The next morning, Richard woke with a purpose. No assistants, no appointments, just his Maybach, the memory of the boy, and a heart filled with questions. He drove the same road, scanning every field, every bend. Hours passed, no sign of the boy. Eventually, he arrived at a dusty gas station in a small town called Maple Hill. Inside, he described the boy to the woman behind the counter. She paused. "Sounds like you're talking about Noah Daniels. Sweetest kid you'll ever meet. Lives with his mama at the end of Pinewood Road." Richard thanked her and left. As he drove toward Pinewood, he noticed his palms were sweating. Why was he nervous? At the end of the lane stood a small house, worn but tidy. Flowers in cans lined the porch. A homemade wind chime tinkled in the breeze. Richard parked, took a breath, and knocked. The door opened to reveal a woman in her early 40s. Her eyes were tired but kind. She looked Richard up and down. "Can I help you?" "Hi, I'm looking for Noah. He helped me yesterday. I had a flat tire." She smiled warmly. "Sounds like my boy. Come in. He's in the back, fixing the fence." The house was modest. Faded curtains, mismatched furniture, but it radiated warmth, the kind that no amount of money could buy. Family photos covered the walls. A few crayon drawings were pinned to the fridge. The air smelled of freshly baked bread. "You have a beautiful home," Richard said. "It's not much," she replied, "but it's ours." She led him out to the backyard, and there was Noah, kneeling in the grass, hammer in hand. He looked up. "Hey, mister, what are you doing here?" Richard walked slowly toward the boy. For a man used to commanding attention, he suddenly felt nervous. "I just wanted to say thank you again. What you did yesterday, it meant more than you know." Noah shrugged, his tone easy. "Wasn't a big deal." Richard chuckled softly. "To you, maybe, but to me, it was." Noah stood, brushing grass off his knees. "Most people don't stop to help. I figured maybe I should." Richard nodded, silent for a moment. Then, "Why didn't you take the money?" Noah looked at him plainly. "Because help should come with no price tag. That's what my mom taught me." The man who once negotiated billion-dollar deals had no reply, only a lump forming in his throat. The porch creaked slightly as Richard sat beside Lisa and Noah, the scent of honeysuckle drifting in from the yard. It was a simple setting, worn wood, chipped paint, but there was something sacred about its simplicity. Noah drank from a mason jar filled with lemonade, while Lisa folded laundry beside him. Richard cleared his throat. "I've seen a lot in my life. Power, luxury, more money than I could ever spend. But I've never felt the peace I feel here." Lisa looked at him, surprised. He turned to Noah. "You helped me without hesitation, without knowing who I was. That kindness changed something in me." Noah glanced down, unsure what to say. "I want to help you," Richard said, voice steady. "Not out of pity, out of respect. Let me renovate your home, give you access to resources, mentorship, education, whatever you need." Noah sat still, processing. "We're okay, really." "But you shouldn't have to settle for just okay," Richard said softly. "You've given me a reminder of who I used to be, before wealth got in the way." Lisa finally spoke, her voice warm. "Sometimes accepting help is an act of strength." Noah met Richard's eyes. Something inside him began to shift. The sky was streaked with shades of orange and pink as evening settled. In the backyard, crickets began their nightly chorus, and a gentle wind rustled through the wildflowers that lined the fence. Richard stood, walking a few steps into the yard. "You know," he said, glancing back at them, "I thought I had everything figured out. Turns out I forgot what really matters." Noah followed him quietly. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I used to be like you. My dad was a carpenter. We didn't have much, but we had purpose. Over time, I replaced that with deals, meetings, profits. But what you did, Noah, what you are, it reminded me." Noah looked thoughtful, watching his mother through the open window as she stirred something on the stove. "I don't want to change you," Richard added. "I want to support who you already are." Noah hesitated. "What if we take your help, and people think we're just lucky?" "Then let them," Richard said with a soft smile. "I know the truth, and you do too." A moment of silence passed between them. Then Noah nodded slowly. "Okay," he said, his voice small but certain. "Let's do it." 3 days later, the rumble of trucks echoed down Pinewood Road. Neighbors peeked from their porches as a caravan of contractors, electricians, and builders followed Richard's lead to the small house tucked between the hills. Noah stood on the porch, barefoot, wide-eyed as men in uniforms unloaded tools, scaffolding, and fresh lumber. Lisa came out behind him, hand covering her mouth in disbelief. Richard arrived last, clipboard in hand. He smiled. "Told you I don't do things halfway." The crew began immediately. The sagging porch was torn down and rebuilt stronger. The leaky roof was replaced with new shingles. The kitchen, where Lisa had cooked on a broken stove for years, was gutted and fitted with new appliances. Noah tried to help, lifting planks, sweeping sawdust, but Richard gently stopped him. "Your job now is to learn, not labor." One of the contractors, a burly man named Miguel, noticed Noah's curiosity and invited him to measure boards. Before long, Noah was asking about drills, beams, and insulation. He wasn't just watching change, he was becoming part of it. For the first time in his life, Noah saw what possibility looked like. Not in books or dreams, but right in front of him, real, tangible, and full of hope. Days turned into a week, and the house was nearly unrecognizable. The windows now sparkled with clarity. The walls, once weathered and peeling, gleamed with fresh coats of paint in soft, earthy tones. The creaky floors had been replaced with polished hardwood, and the old bathroom tiles were swapped for modern ceramic. But it wasn't just the house changing. Noah changed too. Every morning, he rose early to greet the workers, eager to learn. Miguel, the lead carpenter, had taken him under his wing. "You've got a good eye, kid," he'd say, handing Noah the measuring tape. "Better than most adults I've trained." Richard would often watch from the edge of the yard, silently observing. He no longer felt like an outsider. He felt included, needed. He brought lunch some days, helped sand a beam. But more importantly, he listened. To Noah's stories, to Lisa's hopes, to the heartbeat of a life he'd forgotten he missed. Lisa's eyes no longer carried the same weight. Her smile came easier, her steps lighter. One evening, she told Richard, "I haven't seen Noah this excited since his dad passed." Richard nodded, voice quiet. "Neither have I." And he meant every word. The days Richard spent at the Daniels house began to blur. What had started as an act of gratitude became something deeper, habit, even comfort. When he pulled into their driveway, the porch light would already be on. Lisa would greet him with a cup of coffee, and Noah would rush to show him what he had built or fixed that day. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Richard stayed behind after the crew had packed up. He and Lisa sat quietly on the new porch steps, watching Noah chase fireflies. "You don't talk much about your past," Lisa said gently. Richard gave a tired smile. "There's not much worth telling, or maybe I just forgot how to tell it." Lisa looked at him kindly. "Maybe it's not about telling. Maybe it's about remembering who you were before the world made you forget." Those words landed heavier than expected. For the first time in years, Richard didn't feel like a billionaire or a retired executive. He just felt like a man rediscovering the joy of watching a child laugh, of sharing quiet evenings, of belonging. And the strangest part? It felt like home. One evening, heavy clouds rolled across the sky, thunder rumbling in the distance. The workers left early, concerned about the incoming storm. Richard offered to drive back to his estate, but something in him told him to stay. That night, the rain came down in sheets. Power flickered and went out. The old house groaned in the wind, but the newly reinforced frame held firm. By candlelight, the three of them gathered in the living room. Lisa brought out board games, and Noah told stories that had them all laughing. Richard had never felt safer. When the storm reached its peak, a tree outside cracked and collapsed, missing the house by inches. They all rushed to the window, hearts pounding. "Guess the porch roof did its job," Richard said with a breathless grin. Lisa nodded, her hand brushing against his. "We built it right." After the storm passed, silence settled again. Not fear, not damage, just peace. A reminder that even storms can't shake what's built with heart. That night, Richard didn't sleep in his mansion. He slept on a couch with a wool blanket, in a small house filled with love. The next morning, under crisp blue skies, the neighborhood buzzed. People dropped by to check on the Daniels family. Seeing Richard there, elbow deep in a toolbox, caused more than a few double takes. But nobody questioned it. Kindness has a way of explaining itself. Later that day, Lisa handed Richard a box. Noah and I wanted to give you something. Inside was a framed drawing, a childlike but heartfelt picture of Richard standing between Noah and Lisa in front of the newly restored house. Richard blinked rapidly. I don't know what to say. You don't have to, Lisa said. You've given us so much. This is just our way of saying, you belong here too. He held the frame close, unsure how something made with crayons could weigh more than gold. That evening, Richard placed the drawing in his home office. Not in storage, not hidden, but right above his desk. So he'd never forget where real wealth came from. Weeks passed. The renovations were complete. The house was not just repaired, it had been transformed, and so had everyone who touched it. Richard still visited every weekend, sometimes to bring supplies, sometimes just to sit with Lisa and drink coffee. Other times he and Noah would tinker in the shed, building birdhouses or planting vegetables. It became a rhythm, a new kind of business, one that dealt not in profit, but in presence. Then one Saturday, Richard surprised them. I set up a scholarship, he told Noah, for local kids who want to study engineering. You're the first name on the list. Noah's eyes widened. You mean college? Yes, and after that, an internship, if you still want to build things. Noah looked at his mother. She was crying but smiling. I don't know how to thank you, Noah said. Richard knelt slightly, resting a hand on the boy's shoulder. You already did. That day you changed my tire. The town threw a small block party to celebrate the renovation. Neighbors brought casseroles, lemonade, and homemade pies. String lights hung across the yard, and laughter echoed long into the evening. A local band played old country songs, and someone handed Richard a guitar. He hadn't played in decades, but he strummed a gentle tune. Lisa sang beside him, and just for a moment, it was as if time folded. A man with gray in his hair, a woman with strength in her soul, and a boy who started it all. There were no speeches that night, no toasts, just moments, shared glances, silent understanding, and joy, the kind that doesn't need to be explained. A few days later, Richard received a letter, not typed, handwritten. It was from Noah. Dear Mr. Richard, you probably don't know this, but before I met you, I didn't believe people like you even saw kids like me. I thought I'd grow up, fix fences, maybe move out one day. But you saw something in me I didn't know was there. I promise I won't waste it. P.S. I fixed up the swing in the back. Saved you a seat. Your friend Noah. Richard read it twice, then a third time. He folded it carefully and placed it inside the frame with the crayon drawing. Months passed. Seasons shifted. Richard sold his mansion, not out of necessity, but because it no longer felt like home. He bought a modest house down the road from Lisa and Noah, a quiet place with a garden, a workshop, and a front porch. He became part of the community, attended local events, sponsored school programs. He didn't want fanfare, just purpose. Some people were surprised, but those who knew the story weren't. After all, it wasn't just a tire that was repaired that day. It was a man. Years later, Noah stood in front of a crowd at a community center. He was tall now, confident, wearing a hard hat and a tool belt. Behind him was a new building, his first design as a certified engineer. This center is dedicated to my mentor, Richard Langston, he said, not because he gave me money, but because he gave me belief. Richard sat in the front row, tears in his eyes. Lisa squeezed his hand, and the crowd stood in applause, not just for the building, but for what it represented. That kindness, when freely given, can change everything. The last scene was quiet. Richard and Noah sat on the porch of the Daniels house, watching the sun set behind the trees. The wind was warm, the yard full of life. I still think about that day, Richard said. You walking up with dusty sneakers and changing everything. I think about it too, Noah replied, and I still wouldn't take your money. They laughed. Lisa stepped outside with sweet tea and sat between them, and there they stayed. Not as a billionaire and a boy, but as a family, built not on blood or wealth or obligation, but on a single, selfless act. and the truth that some things in life, like kindness, connection, and love, are always worth more than money. Lessons learned. Kindness needs no reason. Noah helped a complete stranger without expecting anything in return, and that one small act of kindness sparked a life-changing journey. Giving is the greatest form of receiving. Richard offered material help, but what he received in return, human connection, purpose, and love, was far more valuable. True wealth isn't measured in money. A warm home, genuine relationships, and heartfelt moments matter far more than status or luxury. Small acts can create big changes. What started as a flat tire became the catalyst for transformation, not just for one boy, but for a man who had forgotten what truly matters.